You know you need something, you're just not sure what. You've been listening, you're doing the work, but there's still this feeling that you're circling the same place, like you're waiting for the thing that finally moves you. Now, maybe you've thought about working with me one on one. Maybe something's held you back, the timing, the money, or you're just not sure you're ready yet. I get that. And I want you to know there's still a place for you. I built a resource for exactly this moment, guided meditations for when the waves hit and you just need to breathe, workbooks to help you get out of your head and onto the page, ebooks on what near-death experiences tell us about the people we've lost and whether they're really gone, a full course for widows and widowers who are ready to find their way back to living, and a full course for the evidence of the afterlife. And all of it is available for pay what you want. Nobody gets turned away because of money. I think these resources are valuable, but I don't want to hold them back because you don't have the money to pay for them. You don't have to wait until you're ready for coaching. The next step might be a lot smaller than you think. To find out, go to grieftogrowth.com/store. That's grief, the numeral 2, growth.com/store, and check out the resources I made for you. Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hi there, welcome to Grief to Growth. I'm Brian Smith, and whether this is your first time here or you've been with me for a while, I'm glad you found your way. This show exists because I believe grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be a doorway into deeper love, deeper meaning, and a life more fully lived. We ask the hard questions here. What happens when we lose someone? What does it mean to grieve well? And what if the people we've lost are still closer than we know? Dina Bell-Laroche is a woman who decided, in the depths of her own grief, to become someone who could light the way for others. When her younger sister, Tracy, passed away in 2001, Dina's world cracked open. And rather than seal it shut, she leaned in. She became a certified thanatologist, a grief doula, a death educator, a keynote speaker, and the author of Grief Unleashed, Moving from the Hole in Our Hearts to Wholehearted. She's brought Grief Cafés to communities, built classrooms in Nicaragua and Northern Ontario in Tracy's name, and most recently helped launch Ottawa's first wind phone. And we'll talk about what the wind phone is today. Like me, Dina knows what it is to carry a loss that reshapes everything. And like me, she's chosen to let that loss mean something. In this conversation, we'll talk about what it actually looks like to grieve in a culture that doesn't know how. We'll explore why the phrase, "I'm sorry for your loss," is both well-meaning and quietly harmful. We'll get into the difference between a grief doula and a grief coach, what a certified thanatologist actually does, and why Dina brings grief literacy into the world of elite sport. And we'll talk about creativity, how building a classroom, writing a book, picking up a wind phone can all be acts of love that reach across the veil. So if you've been quietly carrying your grief, wondering if you're doing it right or wrong, or if anyone else feels the way you do, this episode was made for you. And if you'd like to continue this conversation after the episode, head over to grieftogrowth.substack.com. You'll find an article there about today's discussion where you can comment and connect with me and other listeners. And with that, I want to welcome Dina Bell-Laroche.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted.
Yeah, we've talked a couple of times before, and I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation today for the people of our podcast. Before we get into all the other stuff, though, tell me about your sister.
Well, thank you for asking about her right at the top and for naming her. You know, that's often something that really opens up the bereaved's heart is when we invite them to speak their person's name. So often we'll talk about our daughter that died or our parent or our sister or our sibling, but we don't actually use their name because it hurts so much. And yet when we do, it makes it real and profound and we can be witnessed in that experience. So thank you for modeling that. I'm really grateful. So Tracy was a 29-year-old mom. She was She wasn't actually a mom yet. She was pregnant with her firstborn. And I had a 3-month-old baby in my arms. And she was experiencing a lot of duress. And in January of 2000, so just at the top of, the millennial, we were worried that the world was going to be on fire. She ended up in hospital. And within 48 hours, we went from really excited that she was going to have her baby to an emergency C-section and discovering that she had a 14-pound tumor that was growing right alongside her baby.
Mm.
The kind of cancer she had, Brian, was so rare. Only 220 people around the world had that kind of cancer. It's a childhood cancer, actually, a Ewing sarcoma. And the trajectory of her illness, it was, I'd say, amongst the hardest thing for me and my parents and her husband and our family and friends to witness.
Yeah.
Giving birth to a baby, hosting her shower in the hospital before he was born, and then the ups and downs of the roller coaster ride that is a long illness, until she died 13 months later, just after her baby had turned 1.
Mm.
So it was really, I would say, there's a before, and I'm sure people will resonate with this. There was a before Tracy died and an after.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the language. People didn't come to us, Brian, and say, okay, Tracy's family, here's what you are likely to experience. Here are some of the things that are a normal part of the grieving experience that will accompany her life-altering trajectory. Nobody told us that she was dying. Like we didn't have these really hard but ever important conversations that then truncated our grief and had us retreating into our respective grief caves, that didn't really help us feel seen, heard, valued, appreciated for the experience that we were going through. And it didn't give Tracy permission to actually talk about all these fears that she was holding right
Mm.
alongside the hope, right? So in large part of because of this experience, and we'll probably get into it because it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm going to become a grief advocate. It was, I don't know who I am anymore. And while
Mm.
I was reassembling the pieces of my broken heart, because Tracy was one of, you know, the favorite people on the planet, and it's been 25 years, but it feels like yesterday at times, right?
Mm. Mm.
That pain that arises, these stugs, these sudden temporary upsurges in grief, which connect me back to that pain of her death. And yet, because of this belief in our love and that love endures and energy changes form, it doesn't just disappear. I'm stubborn and committed and loyal, and it just felt wrong to not talk about her, to not keep her memory alive, to not find ways to teach my 3 children about their Auntie Titi, to not do things in her memory that would make the world a better place, to not continue our bond, which is this beautiful theory in grief work that talks about how death ends a life. It doesn't have to end a relationship. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a little bit more about Tracy.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And you said something there that really touched me. You said, it's been 25 years, but sometimes, those things still come up and it feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
I was talking with someone a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I'm sorry for your loss of your daughter. He goes, but I know it's been a long time, as if like that meant it was somehow diminished or reduced or something. And it's important for people to know, you say it's been 25 years, but that doesn't mean that Tracy's diminished from your life at all.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like 25 years and a day.
Yeah.
Our bodies understand a different language than our head does. And
Mm.
I suspect that this will really resonate with you. We understand chronological time, chronos time, right? So we
Right.
can understand that 25 years is a long time. We could do the grief math and, 365 days times 25. That's a lot of days. It's a lot of miles. It's a lot of tears. It's a lot of joy, though, that has also been,
Hmm.
um, a part of our journey. And yet we also have Kairos time. This is this liminal space that you and I dance in. It's when we are connected to maybe the universe in a way that that our bodies understand. So bodies understand time and touch and movement and breath, right? That's the language of body. And so when we are finding ourselves back in a moment that brings me back to the moment she took her last breath, or the moment that she gave birth to her son, and we were watching this, right? To the moment that she was my maid of honor and I was hers. Like all of these little moments that then come in to our sphere and into our hearts, that's Kairos time. And that Kairos time needs a different language.
Yeah.
So these stugs that I referenced, right? These sudden, temporary upsurges in grief. That's the language that our body understands. And usually it's activated when there's a memory. It could be a smell. It could be a feeling, a sensation. It could be somebody that walks by you and you're like, that's my daughter. That's my sister. That's my person. It is a felt sensory experience that transcends the intellect, but our body understands it. So Stugs, which was coined by Therese Rando, who's a thanatologist and a bereavement expert, that language brought so much healing to my heart because I felt seen in that experience. Language opens up worlds, right? Language connects us to our lived experience. When I read Stugs, I went, oh, I thought I was going crazy. So I often share with people, Stugs, they feel like a panic attack, right? You could be shopping and all of a sudden you walk by the cookie aisle and there's your person's favorite cookies. And then all of a sudden you're eat, pray, loving on the floor. And you're like, what just happened to me? They dissipate with time. Here's the other thing I'll share though. With all respect to Therese Rando, I would offer that Stugs can also stand for sudden temporary upsurges in grace. I have fallen to my knees experiencing such profound moments of joy. I think grief opens up our heart, our chakras, and makes us more porous, more human. Instead of denying and suffocating and suppressing, we lean into a human experience and we're touched by what it means to be human. We are acutely aware that our time on this earth is finite because we've suffered through so much profound pain, right? In this Kairos time space, I think that these sudden temporary upsurges in grace allow us to connect not just with ourselves and our person, but also the entire universe and planet. And in these experiences where I've fallen to my knees, it's always been in nature. And nature doesn't discriminate. My trees, as I call them, are my sentinels. I feel this downloading, this upsurge in love. I feel warmth and connected, and I have no energy to stay upright. So I'm like falling to my knees and just in this experience. Usually they last about 90 seconds before I know that I'm in the experience. And then as soon as I become conscious that I'm in an experience like this, it starts to dissipate. And I'm left wondering like, no, come back. I want to savor this. So it's, I haven't had these extraordinary experiences like maybe half a dozen times or so, but they're becoming more frequent, Brian. And I think it's because I'm doing the work of opening up my heart, of giving myself permission to not have been the one to die. Because when your sibling dies, I was left wondering, why her and not me? We have the same parents. We have the same lineage, the same blood coursing through our veins. How is it possible that she ended up with this rare disease and I didn't? And as her bigger sister, the only one that was going to pick on her was me. So a lot of feelings of shame, of guilt, survivor guilt, which I have, I'd say I'd make peace with. I've let go of this need for me to have to live life times two. Now I'm living life times one, still in honor of her. There's more room for me, though. And because of that, I think I'm accessing different levels of compassion that were unavailable to me before.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Did you know that a new survey reveals that 23% of Americans have had a near-death experience or NDE, and 35% know someone who has? This phenomena is more common than we thought. This August, 1,000 people are expected to gather for the International Association for Near-Death Studies annual conference in Bellevue, Washington, August 26th through 30th. The conference features well-known authors like neurosurgeon Eben Alexander, who experienced an NDE while in a coma and was transformed by what he experienced. More than 30 people will present research, discuss mental health and NDEs, explore spirituality, and support one another. Attendees will enjoy a bookstore featuring author book signings, an exhibit floor, a healing center, and a joyous Saturday night dance party. Early bird registration rates are available through July 15th. Visit ians.org now, IANDS.org, and join the 1,000 people who are expected to attend. Interesting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So when you went through this process, and there was obviously some things you thought could be done better, because you said, I'm going to become a certified thanatologist, a grief doula. Let's explain some of these terms that we threw out in the introduction.
Yeah, I love that. So I had no idea what thanatology meant. So let's deconstruct that. Ology is the study of, right? When you think of biology. Thanatos, is the Greek god of death. So if you go back to Marvel, right?
We all know that from the Marvel movies now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So god of death. So there's a whole field of study called thanatology. And I didn't even know what the word was. And I'm a journalist by trade, right? I studied journalism. So when I came into the landscape of this and wanting to understand this more from a place of like, oh, so it was beyond curiosity. Now it was activating in me this deep desire to advocate. I'm taking you back to about 2015, 2016. So Tracy died in 2001. In 2011, I read a book that changed my perspective. It was by Dr. Alan Wolfelt, who's recognized as a grief educator. He's a psychologist, and he's written, 35 books on grief and loss. And his book, Understanding Your Grief, changed everything for me. So there was this opening up, this permission granted, this ability for me to really understand that what was happening to me was a normal part of being a bereaved person, right? There was nothing wrong with me that I wanted to continue my bonds. In fact, Dr. Wolfelt applauded that. So that was the beginning. And then I started reading other things. I started to recognize that sibling loss is part of the group of disenfranchised grievers, right? Alongside children, people with intellectual disabilities, often people of color, often disenfranchised in their experience and expression of grief. So because I'm so curious, and then I'm a bit of a social justice warrior, I began to see the group of bereaved people, which is heck, all of us on the planet, as people who are not being nourished by the language of loss. And so in 2019, just before, as I turned 50, I had named 50 things that I wanted to experience. And one of them was to learn under Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He had a 4-day companioning the bereaved course in Colorado. So I flew from Ottawa, Canada to Colorado as part of my 50 by 50 living intentionally on the planet. I came back from that experience and I was like, okay, I actually want to do this vocationally. This is my soul work. I didn't know what that was going to look like. I knew I had a book in me to write. So I sat underneath my tree, and the backstory doesn't matter, but a woman by the name of Laura Traplin who's a medium. I met with her, and from her location and mine online, right, just on a call, her first words to me were, and this is before I started writing about this publicly, her first words were, Dina, does the word death doula mean anything to you? So I took that as a sign. I enrolled in a thanatology program. I've just completed my 12th thanatology course, which academia. It's not easy now I'm 57 to go back to school and study this vocationally. Along the way, I became aware of the profession of thanatologist, and it's important for me to hold this with integrity and reverence. So I certified as a professional thanatologist with the Association of Death Educators and Counselors out of the US. So I'm part of this guild this sisterhood, brotherhood, that really is about reclaiming our humanity through the prism of lost literacy. Because here's what I've learned, Brian. The more I do the work on myself and meet my grief from a place of grace, the more I'm feeling less distracted. I'm not turning to things that are going to numb my pain. In fact, I can stay more open to the source of my pain. My ego then becomes a little less protective. And so I can work on my own way of being and seeing and acting in the world from a place of love for myself and reverence, right, for others. So this work of thanatology has really shaped the person I've become, the way I parent my now 3 adult children, the way I spouse. I've married my high school sweetheart, the way I companion others, the way I teach. I offer a program where I can teach people how to become companions. And I would say I'm a leadership coach, so I'm certified as a professional leadership coach. And this lens through which I companion my clients, executives, athletes, other sport coaches, really has shifted, because what I've started to appreciate more fully is we become attached to people, identities, experiences. And when that attachment is severed, that's when grief arises, right?
Yeah.
So it's just really been, I'd say, a beautiful way for me to be a human on the planet. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thanatology, is that more, it almost sounds like a medical thing. It's not from a medical perspective. Is it more from helping people grieve? Is that what it's about?
Yeah, I love that you've raised that. So, as a thanatologist, we become really acutely aware of the death trait. There's a system. Think of like funeral practitioners, think
yeah.
of hospitals, think of the way in which we dispose of bodies, right? So think of the death as a system.
Okay.
And post World War II, we became allergic to anything related to grief and loss.
Yeah.
Before World War II, we didn't have the luxury of denying death. We had different practices in place. We had rituals and community. Black meant something. Wearing black meant something, right? We have, since post-World War II, I would offer, become really allergic, as if denying death and loss is going to prevent it from happening.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think the field of thanatology, informed by psychology, has evolved and emerged in response to the denial of death, the suppression of death.
Yeah.
Modern day grief theory is a reclamation, if you will. It's out there trying to inform people, educate people. The other thing I'll share is the medical model, a North American kind of approach to what illness is, and it is much more interested in fixing problems. It's diagnostic in its nature. The work that I do is much more about whole human care. So we are coming into systems, medical model systems, and saying, hey, human, to the doctor, what's your relationship with grief and loss? Right? So there's a reclamation on foot, because grief is not a pathology. In this DSM, right? So DSM-5, which is the Bible of all that ails the human heart, grief is only there as a small little, ailment that affects a very small percentage of the population. And even then, those that are certified as thanatologists and educators, we kind of bristle at the term pathology. We bristle at the word prolonged grief as a disorder.
Yeah.
The analogy I give is, if a woman's having complications in her birthing experience, we wouldn't say she's suffering from prolonged birthing disorder, right? So there's a lot of education, reclamation, that I think that I'm a part of as a thanatologist. We're advocates for a more informed way of being with grief and loss.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Do near-death experiences and related phenomena fascinate you? Are you curious for more information about this spiritually impactful experience? Well, I have great news for you, because a spiritual Super Bowl is coming to Seattle, August 26th through 30th. The International Association for Near-Death Studies, or IANS, will host its annual conference at the Hyatt Regency in Bellevue. The event features an all-star lineup of keynotes like Proof of Heaven author Eben Alexander and Dying to Be Me author Anita Morjani. IANS will also offer continuing education for professionals, a healing center, exhibit floor, bookstore, and a fun-filled Saturday night party. Early bird registration rates are available through July 15th. Visit IANS.org, IANDS.org now, and join 1,000 people who are expected to attend. You'll experience connection with an incredible community of near-death experiencers and seekers. That's awesome, because one of the things I realized now, I had thanophobia when I was a child. I was scared of death, so that's where I know the thano prefix from. But I realized in our society as I got older that we don't talk about death. Most of us, a lot of us have never seen someone pass. A lot of us haven't seen a body. I remember my father saying when he was younger, if someone passed away, they had a parlor in the house, and they'd lay the body in the parlor, and the body would stay there for a few days. And now the body's whisked away, and we might see it at some point, but we're just as you said, we're really uncomfortable with the idea of death. And doctors are taught that death is the ultimate failure, right? So their role ends when the body stops. That's the end of their thing, and then they feel like they've lost. And we've been taught to fight death with everything because it's the enemy. And when it's like it's the only thing that we all know is going to happen to all of us. So the denying it is really that's the problem. And I'm glad to see there's emphasis being placed on how do we integrate this into our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I would say we have to ask ourselves why. Why have we been conditioned to deny death? And so Philippe Ariès, which is he wrote The Hour of Our Death years ago. So I would encourage any listeners to go in and become more informed. Why are we not talking to children about this? So many parents come to me and say, how do I how do I deal with this? Should I bring the kid to the funeral? The child's part of your family system. Denying it just actually makes them feel. So many of my clients have had really bad experiences when they were younger related to death and loss, which contributes to the fear, right? Children know how to grieve. They come on our laps, they're crying because something was taken from them, right? That's the body's response to that severed attachment. So why aren't we talking about this? And here's my take. Capitalism or post-capitalism, right, in our structure wants us to keep producing and consuming. Death and grief and loss, it interrupts that focus, that denial, that numbing that sets in when we're wounded, right? Trauma, a wound to the soul. So I think in large part, as we're now starting to kind of like sit up straighter and question structures, one of the things that we become more aware of is our tendency to numb, to distract. And so when we do the reclamation work, we start to ask ourselves, well, of course, our systems and structures have put metrics around grief and loss. I'll give you one example, Brian. So we tend to compete with each other's losses, right? We will understand the death of a child is like the hardest experience to navigate. And then underneath that might be death of a spouse, death of a parent, death of a sibling, death of a cousin. Like we order our grief in this so-called griefarchy. It's not necessary. If there's one time that we should be given a hall pass, it's when we have navigated loss, the loss of someone we care about, or it could be the loss of identity, right? I'm doing a lot of workforce adjustments right now, and I'm sure you're traveling through that as well. It is incredibly heart-wrenching work when someone is told, here's your pink slip. Thanks for coming out for the last 30 years. So I think there's, a lot of what we're speaking to when we understand that our systems and structures designed mainly post-World War II, modeled after a competition and a command and control model, military, corporate, It gives us 5 days for a child, 4 days for a parent and
Yeah.
spouse, 3 days,
Yeah.
right? Like we tend to be reductionistic in
Hmm.
our approach that is a human experience that shifts and shapes everything that we are. So a part of the work I do when I'm doing corporate culture work is we come in and do an audit, an inventory of their so-called human relations practices.
Hmm.
Show me how you care about people who have suffered through a life-altering loss, and I'll show you whether or not your culture is thriving.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And talking about the hierarchy of when we lose someone, yeah, we tend to do that, and we think, loss of a child. I remember one time I was talking, and I actually slipped up and said this to this woman. I said, the loss of a child is the worst loss you can go through.
Yeah.
And she said, no. She said, I've lost a child. She lost a son. She goes, and I just lost my spouse recently. And she said, I can tell you, losing my child was no worse than losing my spouse.
Yeah.
And I've been working with a lot of people recently, and I work a lot with people who lost children because of my experience and
Mm.
working with helping parents heal. And lately, I've been dealing with people who have lost spouses, and it's a different loss. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. It's different because our children grow up and they move away, but our spouses are that person we expect to be there, every day for the rest of our lives, the person that we wake up with. So it's a different loss, and losing a sibling, as you said, that's one of the losses that we kind of like put us. We rank that one down low, so we don't acknowledge that that's just as important as losing, a parent or a child.
Yeah, I love you. You just said it perfectly. It's an important, significant, meaningful loss. So often I will say to people when I'm doing my grief education is let us allow the loss to lead the way.
Yeah,
In this
yeah,
community, in this conversation, we don't have to compete or compare or contrast. We can just allow our loss to be the most significant loss for us in this moment. And you can do
exactly.
the same. And our broken hearts can meet each other in that field.
Yeah, exactly. I always think about this. The one guy that called me up, and in our first meeting, he's filled out my intake form, and he said he had lost his best friend. So in our first meeting, we were talking, and he mentioned he had lost his cat, and I said, "This poor guy's lost his best friend and his cat."
Mhm.
Turns out it was his cat. His cat was his best friend, and he was coming to me because he lost his cat. But pet loss sometimes we don't
Oh,
acknowledge. And people say, well, is that a real kind of grief? And I'm like, yes, our pets can be closer to us than many humans are.
yeah.
Your pet is the one that loves you unconditionally. Your pet's the one that's always there for you.
Hmm.
Unlike your children, they're not going to grow up and leave you.
Hmm.
Unlike your spouse, they're not going to divorce you.
Hmm.
That's unconditional love. So
Yeah.
that's extremely important loss. It's important that we point that out.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well done. Well done on the companioning. That's like A plus plus, what you
Well,
just shared.
it's like I said, and then as you get into this field, you learn that you expand the definition. It's not just losing a person. It's not just losing a pet. It could be the loss of a job or an identity.
Yeah.
I have a friend that he wasn't really let go. He was given an early retirement,
Mm.
and I'm like, we should be happy, man. You got to retire, and
Uh-huh.
it
Uh-huh.
gave you a bunch of money to leave, but
Yeah.
it was his loss of identity. It's
Yeah.
like that's what he had known for 40 years, and suddenly it's like they felt like they didn't need him anymore. So that was a grief event that he had to go through.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that because when I think of when you just talked about retirement, this is the truth that I witness when I'm with athletes, for instance. So
Yeah,
many of them are retiring or retired at a very tender age, right? I'd say
yeah,
most of the athletes I see are between the ages of 28 and 40.
yeah.
So young, right? And they are coming to me because nobody else in their world really understands what is happening inside of them.
Hmm.
So typically, when we're feeling bad, we turn to a therapist or a psychologist, if we even allow ourselves to do that. So
Right.
many of the athletes I work with have been conditioned to control the mind,
Yeah.
mental performance, right? So I help them understand grief is an embodied experience, your social, your interpersonal, your body, your mind, your spiritual way of being. So understanding grief as a omni-dimensional experience helps them understand and deconstruct from just this is something I'm just going to get over. I'm going to plow through it because that's what helped me be the elite athlete that I was for over 10 years, right?
Yeah. Right.
So when we understand that, the dimensions of our grief, and we invite our grief to come to the table and teach us what it means to be human now in this body that has let me down. So there's often a lot of anger towards our body, right? In the case of people who I'm working through with workforce adjustments, there's a sense of betrayal, a sense
Mm-hmm.
of who am I now, a sense of wandering into like this next chapter in their life. So I get them to visualize their life as chapters.
Yeah.
And I also open up the space for, how do we have to learn how to say goodbye before we can say hello.
Hmm.
So how do we want to say goodbye? So often what we'll do is co-create ritual. Now, I think you'll love this, Brian. So we have routines, right? So when someone you love dies, might be your spouse, you have to unlearn the habit of waking up in the morning, going to make their bed or kissing them or making them coffee, right? Those are routines that you have fallen into,
Right.
right?
Right.
You have they have just become your way of being. Rituals are different. We step into ritual with these are intentional actions that are symbolic and derive a new sense of meaning. So ritual, we know from centuries of work, it's in our bodies. We can curate these rituals to help us understand what has just happened to me? How do I want to be in this experience of transition? Because that's why it's so scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then in what ways can I understand and give myself space and grace to travel through these unknown waters? It is such a compassionate, skillful way of being when we're navigating transition. But who's talking about it this way, the way you
Yeah.
and I are talking about it, right?
Yeah, well, again, it's this idea of, you said, it's basically if a tie is severed, it's loss of identity, a job, a person. It's a similar process that we're going through, and you put it very well. And that we have these routines that we're in. And I'm a huge sports fan. I love watching sports. And as a kid, I watched sports, and they were all older than I was, and then they were about my age, and now they're all like, of course, much younger than I am.
Right?
And now I have sympathy for these guys that are 35, 40 years old, if they make
Yeah.
it that long. And it's like, you've been playing the sport since you were 5 years old. It's been your entire identity. You
Mhm.
use your body, that's your identity.
Mhm.
And so sometimes, we can criticize from the outside. Why are they hanging on so long? Why don't they just retire already? That's the end of an identity for that person.
100%. And they haven't likely, so when we think about the boomerang, so they retire, then they come back. They
Yeah.
retire, they come back. It's because of the relationship. They don't want it to be severed. It
Yeah.
didn't feel like we don't consciously complete our time. So this is where ritual. I talk about, so I've worked with teams, right?
Hmm.
So teams who, let's say they were vying for the gold and now they're fighting for, bronze in the span of what, 48 hours, right? If
Yeah.
you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to find ways to, and athletes typically are conditioned to compartmentalize, put it behind you, suffocate, suppress. Well, that doesn't work for everyone. And so now we're conditioning. Why? Because we've been told and we've inherited practices, military practices that engages us from our hearts,
Hmm.
disengages us from others. This is what helps us do what we do when we're military personnel,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we need to understand and say, well, that may have worked for that, but it doesn't have to work for how I want to be able to tell my teammate who's suffering, because this might be her last game ever on the pitch in
Hmm.
front of the whole world. And
Hmm.
now she's never going to win the gold medal. Or even if she does, part of what I help them understand is the pain, as you said, 10 years, 10,000 hours is what we often say it takes to be at that like ultimate level.
Right.
And when you're shaping young minds and bodies, this is all they've known. It's their entire way of being.
Hmm.
So, of course, we can give them a moment to figure out, how do I want to close off this chapter in my life with intention and grace and compassion? Saying goodbye requires so much courage. And then that gives me space to say hello to the new me. So I work with them on both ends. That's what
Yeah.
coaching does, right? Does that
Yeah.
resonate?
Yeah, that's beautifully put. And I love the parallel between that and the fact of, when we quote lose a person, there's a part of that life, that physical connection that is over. And we've got to learn how to close that out so we can move on to the next chapter.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not it's not the end. And that's I guess the old grief model is like it's the end, put that relationship away,
Right.
it's just I think Freud even called it was like an addiction almost. And
Uh-huh.
I remember when they put the prolonged grief disorder in the DSM-5, reading
Mm.
some professionals were very excited because they thought, well, if it's a disorder, then maybe we can find a pill. And if we can find a pill, we can treat it just like we do depression, right? So we'll just give people this pill and they'll get over their grief. And
Right.
anybody that's gone through a grief event, first of all, we're like, I don't want that pill, even if it exists,
Exactly.
because the only way I'm going to get over my grief is if I forget them. And we don't want to forget them. And we don't want to let go of the relationship.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so we talked about, there was a couple times we mentioned, we covered thanatology really well. Let's talk about what a grief doula is, because
Yeah.
that's a term that might be new to some people as well.
Yeah, beautiful. So I started using the word grief coach in about 2020, right
Hmm.
in the pandemic, because I was offering these grief cafes. I thought to myself, what's one thing I can do to help, right? And I was
Yeah.
absorbing all of these things. I hadn't written my book yet, or the book had not written me yet. It was in me to give birth to, but
Yeah.
um, so I was out there and just I use the word grief coach. Why? Because I'm an integral master coach. I by then I'd had almost, I don't know, 8 or 9 years of coaching. It
Hmm.
was familiar to me. And what do
Hmm.
coaches do? We help you go from A to B. We help you set
Yeah.
goals and objectives and, you know, strive. The word coach, though, I've moved away from it, and here's why. Because our grief really doesn't need coaching. It needs nurturing. It needs witnessing. It needs time and space. Um, and so the word doula kind of dropped into my heart when I
Mm.
was curating my Substack back in 2022. And the word doula means to be a servant to.
Hmm.
And so I'm a leadership coach, so I'm familiar with, constructs around servant leadership. I have been working with this idea of beyond fixing, which is the medical model, and the helping profession, which disempowers often people because we'll often say, here, let me help you. So we position it from me, and we see
Hmm.
people often as broken and wounded.
Hmm.
When we are in the serving mindset, we're actually seeing the whole person first and the patient second, or the
Hmm.
wounded second. We're like, you're already whole and beautiful. You might feel broken, but it's called grieving.
Yeah.
And I can support you through that, but you lead, I follow. That very simple way of showing up, it's our presence, Brian, right? And you know this because you exude such a beautiful quality of presence. That's what wounds do. For those of us who are, I'd say, courageous enough to stay with the pain, something shifts inside of us, right? A level of consciousness becomes more available to us because where we are wounded is truth. It's like drinking from the nectar of this well of grief that David White, the poet, speaks to, right?
Hmm.
Very few of
Hmm.
us will dare to go down. Most of us are throwing coins, wishing for something else. David White reminds us that the well of grief is like it's hard work to go down into the deep, 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 dark waters of this well. But when we drink from I'll call it the nutrients of this pain, it shifts and it allows us to live into our purpose with so much more clarity, compassion, kindness. So for me, the word doula feels more respectful, more accurate. And as a journalist, I want to be accurate
Hmm.
than the word coach. Now, having said that, depends on who my audience is. If I'm working with a senior executive, they're coming to me usually as a coach to help them fix problems, diagnose, right?
Right. Right.
And I would say every conversation, we talk about silver linings, every conversation usually is infused, even if it's very minor, with a flavor of loss. Because even if they're transforming, let's say they're in transformation or they have to fire, notice the language, terminate someone, so
Hmm.
violent, right? This
Hmm.
language. I can acknowledge, and if you were to ask me how do I know, I just know. There's usually a moment when I will acknowledge, Brian, I see that are you in pain? What about you, the CEO? Are you suffering from this conversation that you now need to have with another human that you've come to care about?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
in that moment, there's usually the eyes open up and there might be an expression of emotion. And I'm like, hey, I'm here.
Hmm.
That emotion needs to be processed. If you
Hmm.
suffocate and suppress it, it's going to come back in anger, maybe burnout, right? So if you want to talk about that, we can do that too here in this session.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this lost literacy gives us a capacity to human others, right?
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that resonate?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it shows how it applies across things, right? So we're talking about grief with people losing a person, and we applied it to people losing a job, to someone being forced to, take someone else's job away.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of process. And I love what you talked about, the grief coach. Trying to, when I started doing this, like, what do I call myself? Well, everybody knows, heard the term life coach, so it's like grief coach. And I talked to a guy who was helping me with some marketing stuff, and he said, "How about grief guide?" And
Uh-huh.
he said, because it's like, he
Exactly.
said, "You're like the navigator." And it's like, I tell my
Yes.
clients, it's like you're in the driver's seat and I'm the navigator.
Yeah.
So, you're the one that's in control. And I like even the doula thing even better, because what I've realized is I'm not really trying to get them someplace. It's like they're already there. And it's really, I love being able to work with people, because one of the things I really spend most of my time doing is saying, you're okay. Where you are is okay. The work you're doing is great. The things you're doing, even without me. I just got an email from a client earlier today, and she's telling me about all these things. And she's so aware of what's going on, and like all of her relationships. And she's really, examining herself and figuring out, okay, this is why I do this. And I'm not telling her these things. It's just coming out of her. And I love being there, and I'm just there basically to witness those things.
Yeah. The metaphor, so you've just used the metaphor of a guide, and then I was starting to think of us as compasses, right? Like they have agency, and we
Yeah.
see that in them.
Yeah.
That's a coaching move, right? When people who aren't in the chaos of the emotion and the experience and the physical sensations, when someone who's traversed not the same path, but their path of pain, when they hear us saying, "You will be well.
Hmm.
Keep going, and I'm here to support you." It's like we're a compass, or the other metaphor I use often is the lighthouse,
Yeah. Yeah.
like the ship and the captain. That lighthouse is just there as a reminder. Safety is here. Can I
Hmm.
be this safe haven for you when all else is telling me to move on, put it behind me, get over this experience of this person that I love, or this job that meant everything to me, right? And you're earlier noticing around fear, the fear of death is, and usually it's subconscious. For some
Yes.
people, it's not, but
Yes.
for a lot of us, it's like, we're both fascinated
Yeah.
by death and scary
Right.
movies. Think of scary movies.
Yes.
And we have this aversion to it at the same time.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly. I think you're right. For most people, it is unconscious. It's something. Well, we talked about at the very beginning. It's something we don't think about. Even though we watch murder movies all the time, we watch people being murdered. We watch all kinds of stuff.
Uh-huh.
But we don't think about it ever happening to us or someone in our, that we love, until it does, and then we're
Exactly.
shocked. Like, how could this happen to me? How could this happen?
Exactly.
Yeah, it happens to other people. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen to me. So
No,
that's why we're so unprepared.
exactly. And so this is why I'm an advocate of things like five wishes or advanced care directives. I'm an
Mm,
advocate for things like grief literacy, to give people some time and space to. Nothing will prepare you for the moment. We talk about anticipatory grief, right? So this is usually if you know someone you love is dying,
right.
or the layoffs are coming, we can start to pre-grieve, would be the everyday language I give to people.
Right.
It still doesn't prepare you. It's like you're lifting these weights, these 5-pound weights. So at least I have this in me. But when the loss actually happens,
Yeah.
it's like being thrown a 100-pound weight. So it's
Yeah.
better than nothing, but it doesn't really prepare you for the reality of the pain when it comes knocking, right?
Yeah. That's true. Absolutely. Well, Dina, we're coming pretty close to the end of our time. Before we leave, though, I'd like for you to tell me about your book.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Grief Unleashed, as I said earlier, it's like it kind of like I knew I had to write this. And
Yeah.
what's interesting, I just want to share this with people because often journaling is a form of cathartic,
Hmm.
experiencing and processing for people. Great. For me, as someone who was trained as a journalist, I could not pick up the pen.
Hmm.
7 years.
Hmm.
And then I was doing my master's in something completely unrelated to grief and loss, but I chose to do a study on my experience. And I read my mom's journals from the moment Tracy was diagnosed with cancer until, the day that she gave me her journals. I was reading all of these, and something inside me cracked open to witness my mom's pain. It just, it's like the dam burst. And I went, oh, I need to write about this. So
Hmm.
I started writing. And then my book really is a reflection. It's a mixture of my lived experience as a bereaved sister, but it's very like practical and pragmatic. It speaks about, common experiences of grief. So people have the language. It talks about continuing bonds, which is this beautiful theory. It talks about meaning making. Often there's a deconstruction of our identity when we suffer these life-altering experiences. So I help people understand what that looks like. And it completes with the companioning way. So it's inspired by Dr. Wolfsout, the grief companioning program and
Mm-hmm.
his model. But mine takes it in a different direction, if you will, because I'm informed by integral theory and human development theory. So I speak about how all of us it's in us to companion self and others. And one of the things I share with people is we can only accompany people where we ourselves dare travel. And in there lies the dilemma,
Yeah.
because we want to help people, but we end up helping people the way we want to be helped, in the absence of us having this difficult conversation that might sound something like this. So, Brian, in what way might I be able to serve you as you're continuing to navigate your grief?
Mm-hmm.
That's the conversation,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
in that space, something opens up. So this book, right away, I wanted proceeds to go to something that was going to help the bereaved.
Mm-hmm.
So it took about 3 years. But we now have built this wind phone that you referenced at the top of our time
Yeah.
together. So do you want me to share a little bit
Yeah,
about what wind
please.
phones
Yeah.
are? So wind phones are inspired by a Japanese gardener in 2010 who was a bereaved person. His cousin died, and he was really struggling with it. So he was very creative. He had a beautiful garden. He went out and he found an old phone booth. He put the phone booth in his garden. Then he went and he got a phone, a rotary phone. Remember those?
Yes. Yeah.
So he takes this rotary phone and he puts it in the phone booth. It's not connected to any earthly system. And every day he goes out and he dials his cousin's phone number and he has a conversation with him. In
Mm-hmm.
Japanese, it's called kaze no denwa, which means phone of the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So he kept doing this. And then in 2011, the tsunami hit. Thousands of people were washed out at sea.
Yeah. Yeah.
His phone booth was blown away. He
Yeah.
found his phone booth. He repurposed it, donated it to the people of Japan, and it overlooks what he called the ocean graveyard. So it's overlooking, a part of the ocean, and people started coming because maybe the last thing they said to their person was, "I hate you. I'm angry at you." Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those words left unsaid weigh on our human heart. So this word started to spread. There are hundreds of wind phones around the world. When I first heard this story, it was for a little project. I was looking at creative modalities in grief and loss.
Mm-hmm.
I came across this. There were 12 in Canada. And I wanted ours to be the 13th in Ottawa. There were none. So 3 years later, I think we were number 87 now,
Oh, wow.
right? So this happened last year. And then this year, recently, I launched a new wind phone project. We've already got a donor. So it's happening, and it's with hospice care. So my vision is in a hospice. What is a hospice, right? It's where people go to die,
Mm-hmm.
or people who need respite from their suffering. So grief, if we normalize grief, what a beautiful home. And so these wind phones, they take different shapes. People can go and check them out. But our next wind phone will be, and get this, Brian, the hospice center that I've been volunteering at is right across from where my sister and my dad are resting.
Oh,
So the
wow.
cemetery was there long before the hospice became the hospice. It used to be a church. So
Hmm.
now when I drive up Maple Grove Way, Tracy's and my dad is on the left and my grandparents, and on the right is the hospice center. And then Wind Phone is going to overlook a beautiful part of
Oh, wow.
Canada where the sun can set and people can go and have a conversation with their person, and work through their grief. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I know you have other things. We couldn't even get to everything today, but tell me about your grief companion program.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Um, it's a 4 month journey,
Mm-hmm.
plus and minus some back ends. It's 8 sessions. There's a coaching conversation with me, and people are invited to deepen their relationship with their grief.
Mm,
And as they do that, they grow their capacity to companion others. It has to be in that order. So when people come to me and say, "Oh, I want to do more grief coaching," I'm like, "Well, tell me about one of your losses." "Oh, well, no, I don't want to
yeah,
do that. I want
yeah,
to learn how to help others." Like, well, this is where, in order to be the teacher, you have to become the student. So
yeah.
the humility that you are always exuding, right, that renders us to our knees in awe of the human experience, that is what we teach in the Grief Companion program. So the first 3 sessions are a lot more about grief and loss 101 and etc. But sessions 4 through 8 are all about the companioning way. So we take people into presence and what that
Mm-hmm.
means, embodied rituals, little sign journeys with the rest of the companions so that they're always companioning each other. I'll tell you the best way that someone described the program, and they gifted this to me, is, what is this doing to us? What is this doing for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I love that. Well, where can people find more about you? That we couldn't even get to everything today, but I know you have a Substack
Yeah.
and you have a website. So tell people what they can find there.
Yeah, so my Substack is called The Grieving Place. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
place like as a champion and advocate for grief and loss literacy, I'd say 95% of all my offerings on there are free. I really feel strongly that literacy ought to be distributed so people
Mm,
can access it. And then for people who are more grief professionals, there's a little surcharge, if you will, where they can download all these practices and then join the grief club, the grief cafes. So grief cafes are gathering spaces
mm-hmm.
for people like you and I, Brian. I think it's an ethical imperative for us to find circles to process what we witness. So I have a therapist, right? I came to therapy at the age of 55. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? So
Yeah.
grief circles is like, it's a supervisory kind of experience where we just witness each other, and it's so cathartic. So that's part of my Substack. And then my website just explains to people a little bit more about our offerings. So whether it's the Grief Companion program, you want to go deeper, if you need one-on-one coaching, that's a big part of my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm brought in to help with trauma. So organizations who suffer through either mass casualties or are in deep transformation, I support them with that, or
Yeah.
families who suffered through share losses. So there's all kinds of stuff. One of my favorite things is to do life review with people. I'm trained in dignity therapy, so sitting with someone who's dying
Hmm.
and asking them about their story. Because I'm a journalist by trade, I'm very curious and I love to write. I will narrate through their words, their story, their life story that they want to gift to their people. So I put
Oh, wow.
together this little package and then give it back to them to self-author. So they get the pen.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this can take less than a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that I do to
Just some of
nourish
the
my
things
soul.
that you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing amazing things, and I appreciate you being here today to share them with me and with my listeners. I think obviously I think this is important work. It's not. I tell people I didn't choose this work. It chose me. I don't see people going into this just like, oh, this is what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a guy who talks about death all the time. But I think it's very necessary. So I appreciate what you're doing.
And I appreciate you. I think it takes a lot of, as I said earlier, my 3 values are courage, compassion, community. And I feel like very held by you in this conversation. And I think that when we've suffered through loss, we start to get really sensitive. Our bullshit meter is really, really finely tuned. So we can we can figure out, who do we want to dance more with? Who are people that light me up? Who are people that kind of see me and witness me, and we don't have to compete with each other. We can kind of link arms and say there's enough suffering on the planet.
Yeah.
How can we human together, right? So I just want to thank you and acknowledge all your beautiful work. And I'm just really grateful that we've had this opportunity together.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Brian.
You know, one of the hardest things about grief, most of the people in your life just don't get it. They want you to be further along than you are. They get uncomfortable when you bring it up, so you stop bringing it up. And that's why I started writing. My Substack is where I go deeper, thoughts I don't always get to in the podcast, essays on consciousness, on continuing bonds, on what it actually means to carry a loss and still build a life. The stuff that used to keep me up at night, written out in a way that I hope meets you in the morning. But here's what I didn't expect when I started it: the community that showed up. People who are doing exactly what you're doing. Listening, learning, trying to find their footing. Readers who comment, who share their own stories, who remind each other that none of us are as alone in this as we feel. And that's what the Substack has become, a place to go deeper with me and to find your people. It's free to subscribe. Find me at grieftogrowth.com/Substack. That's growth_growth.com/Substack. Or just go to Substack and search for Grief to Growth. I hope to see you there.